We do have, we definitely have people to get started, and we have a lot to cover. So, Ellen, do you need to take the roll to kick off this meeting? Why don't you do that?
Please.
All right.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Trustee Kane.
Yes, here.
Trustee Donnelly.
Here.
Trustees Ames is not able to join us. Trustee Riley.
Here.
Trustee Loring.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
And we do have some non-voting committee members. Michael Scott is present.
Yes.
President Rice. William Otto.
Here. Here.
Jeremy Chubbett.
Morning. Here.
Morning. And we were expecting Aiden, but he hasn't joined yet. So we're all set to start.
Great. Welcome. I'm Emily Kane. I'm happy to be kicking off the first meeting of the now standing committee on strategic planning. We are picking up as a committee in the sort of the middle of a process that started a little while ago, and we're going to get caught up on that today. But this is the first meeting of this now standing committee, and it's so great that we can all gather together and that we have on this committee not just trustees, but those who represent the faculty, students, staff, and the presidents. And we're also pleased to be joined by so many from the system office today. As I said in an email I sent to all the members of the committee last week, today is not about taking votes. Today is not about making decisions. Today is about grounding ourselves as a committee in where we've been and where we are and kind of the direction that we're headed in. We are going to get caught up and just get aligned with what information we already have, what process is underway, and hopefully have a good time and make the most of these couple hours that we have together. We are going to do introductions, though, even though some of us know each other or we all know each other in different ways. And we did set aside some time in this group to do that. So this morning, I think we should just say who we are and say where you're coming from this morning. And I think it would be great if we could each say one thing that we are proud of about the University of Maine system, whether it's a campus, a faculty member, a staffer, or a program. That way we can start sort of with a sense of things we are proud of. So I'll start. I'm Emily Kane. I'm coming to you from Orono this morning, and I am proud of the Maine Hello, which was here all weekend at the university, where people wave signs and help people carry their stuff into campus. I remember the people helping me in the fall of 1998 when I started at the University of Maine, the volunteers who carried my stuff up 4 flights of stairs in York Hall. It made it a little easier for me and my parents. So we'll start with the trustees. I'm just going to go down my list here. Trish, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Trish Riley. I'm chair of the board. I'm from Brunswick, although at the moment I'm lucky enough to be in Oars Island. I didn't know there's going to be a homework assignment.
I like to spring that on you, Trish.
There's so much to be proud about. I am just proud that we have a public university system that's as robust and nimble as it is, and as diverse as it is, from the R1 to the rural campuses that are so embedded and important to their communities, and just serving so many people of the state of Maine.
That's great. Jim, want to go next?
Sure. Jim Donnelly, currently from my car on the way to Honesdale, Pennsylvania. What I'm proud of, 4 of the 5 members of my are UMaine system, and I from UMaine Presque Isle. And most recently, in last May, my middle and youngest son are both graduates of UMaine.
That's great, Jim. Thank you. Donna, you're next. Then we'll go to Barbara.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Donna Loring, Penobscot Nation tribal elder. What I'm most proud of, I want to say 2 things. One is the Wabanaki Center, Orono campus, and the other is the permanent Wabanaki seat on this board. And I am going to represent the Wabanaki people on this board. Thank you.
And you are the first in that position.
Yes,
and that's pretty awesome. Barbara, let's go to you next.
Good morning, everybody. I am a newly confirmed and appointed member of the Board of Trustees. I feel that I'm still learning quite a bit, but I'm very, very proud of being asked to be on this board and look forward and are excited about all of the challenges that are obviously on our table, and that I will enjoy helping craft responses to and programs to make things better and keep the good things that are good. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's go to our non-voting committee members. This is Michael Scott. There you are.
Yes, good morning. I teach in the School of Computing Information Science at the University of Maine, and I am most proud of the work I've done with students over the years. I have a lab that does a lot of new media development, and it is over 35 years old this fall.
That's awesome. I didn't see Aiden join, right? We haven't seen Aiden yet. Okay. Jeremy, let's go to you.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Jeremy Chubbett, the Associate Executive Director of Facilities Management here in Orono. And I would say probably the thing I'm most proud of here at work would be the collaborative effort that the departments have with a student-centric focus for whether it be Maine Hello, Maine Day, Commencement, Homecoming, any of the major events that we do. It's really a time when other departments come together behind the scenes to support the students.
Thanks, Jeremy. Ray, let's go to you, President Rice.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ray Rice. I'm the president of the University of Maine at Presque Isle. I'm proud to have been an employee of this institution for 26 years, most of that time not as a president. And I'm very proud of the work everyone's done across the system to have a successful startup after these two previous so disruptive years in higher education.
That's great. That's great. Let's go, Professor Otto. Let's go to you.
Hi, I'm Professor of Chemistry at the University of Maine at Machias, where I'm starting my 22nd year. I was waffling with the proud component. I've had all four of my kids taking classes, and one graduate and one almost graduate within the University of Maine system. But then on the sort of professional side, we just completed our 8th year of doing a bridge program to help students who are underprepared to get that leg up so that they can succeed in their first semester. And I think that's professionally the best side. So I slipped 2 in.
That's a lot to be proud of. It's okay. We're happy to share the joy. Chancellor, let's go to you.
Dan Malloy, Chancellor of the University of Maine system. What am I proud of? A couple of quick things. Number one, that we flew through COVID, although it seemed like a long time while we were doing it, with really flying colors, and very proud of how the students, faculty, staff really came together to try to assure one another's safety. Very happy with that. Very happy that this is the most normal opening that we've seen in 3 years, and it has actually gone really well by all reports. And finally, very proud to work with the people from the staff who are arrayed on the screen and are participating in this call. It really is an amazing team that keeps these universities and programs running on a pretty short budget and moving forward. And then, quite frankly, proud of every graduating class that we've had before and looking forward to one in May.
That's great. Thank you. Ellen, you want to go next?
Certainly. Good morning. Ellen Dowdy, Clerk of the Board of Trustees. And I'm proud and honored to serve with such dedicated trustees that work tirelessly for the University of Maine system.
Thanks, Ellen. Ryan, Chancellor Lowe, let's go to you. Vice Chancellor Lowe.
Ryan Lowe, Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration. I'm extremely proud and excited about all of the public officials that pledged their support for the University of Maine system this morning in the BDN article, and look forward to helping them understand how they can get more resources to us.
Love it. Vice Chancellor Placito. Robert.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody. Robert Placito, Vice Chancellor, Academic Affairs. I'm proud of so many things, mostly just to be a part of an institution that has such an impact on our students' lives, their families, future generations. And And frankly, I believe the reason that our country will continue to prosper in the future.
That's great. Jeff St. John.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff St. John, a member of the Chancellor's staff, and I'm very proud of the fact that in about 49 minutes, my oldest child will start his college career as a wildlife ecology major at the University of Maine.
Hopefully he shows up to class on time, I hope. That's great. I still don't see Carolyn, right? We're good. So President Freddie Mundy, I see you here. Why don't you go ahead?
Morning, everybody. I'm Joan Freddie Mundy. I think in this meeting, the hat I'm wearing is Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, but I'm also the president of the University of Maine and our regional campus. I'm proud of so much, but I think I'll single out the students in the class of 2026 who arrived on campus on Friday. As Trustee Kane noted, we had our Maine Hello, but we spent a lot of time with these students Friday and through the weekend, and they are enthusiastic and eager to be back and a little bit tentative. It's been 2 difficult years for them in high school, so I'm proud of their great efforts.
Thank you so much, Joan. We have our, I see Interim President Sake has just joined us too. Hello. Joe, we're saying who we are, where we are, and something we're proud of about the University of Maine system. So you're on next.
Oh, thanks for the intro. Good morning, everyone. So Joe Zakis, President, University of Maine, Augusta. I will just say that, I just heard Joan talk about the resiliency of the students. I think that's, that's probably front of mind. I would just say this is that, one of the things I'm proud of is that the ability of all campuses, but I'll speak specifically about UMA, the ability to aspire and keep looking forward on things. And so we're very proud of that fact.
Thank you so much. And let's go to our friends at Huron. You can do, I know you're going to formally introduce yourself later, but you can do a quick intro too. Peter, why don't we start with you?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Stokes, Managing Director with Huron. Kathy?
And you can also say something you're proud of.
Something I'm proud of. Well,
you know us already a little bit, so something you're proud of about the university.
For sure. It's been a fantastic, I think, 8 months or so now that we've been collaborating with the group here, and it really has been a fantastic collaboration. And it's been a collaboration that has, as I think many of you have been suggesting, has been trying to make the best of all of the tremendous assets that this system of university possesses, but also just to deal with some of the fundamental realities, some of which are challenging. And so I've been really impressed with the intellectual commitment, the emotional commitment, and the educational commitment of the whole group, and look forward to more of that.
Thank you. Kathy, let's go to you.
Good morning, everybody. Kathy Dove, also with Huron. Echo everything that Peter says. I'm going to change the word from proud of to impressed because I can take no credit for it. I am so impressed with not just the commitment of the people we've met throughout Maine, but the resiliency and the passion for the future and working together to make things great. So we're just honored to be working with you. Verna?
Thanks, Brenna, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Verna Casey. I am a manager at Huron, and I am proud to be supporting the University of Maine system through this project. I am particularly very passionate about supporting low-income student populations in higher education, and it's been a great honor to work and support a system that's also committed to the low-income populations in your state and the rural communities that have these universities as anchors to support not only those low-income students, and there's a large percentage of low-income students at many of those universities, but also the families and communities that are around those areas. So thank you for the privilege in getting to work for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brenna. All right. So we are right on time. I'm very happy about that. So the goals for this morning, as my job as chair, is to help us move through this agenda. We did not build in a bathroom break, but I'm going to just say up front, if you need to take a bathroom break or get a glass of water or whatever you need to do, you should just feel free to do that. We'll be here when you get back. And if this is also, I am very comfortable with the little raise hand function, you see, like that. If you would like to use that, I will do my best to keep track if you're waving your hands or if you want to just jump in. But if you use the raise hand function like I have up now, it moves you to the top of the screen, which makes it really easy to see that you want to say something. So we're going to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Trish now to really talk about the shift from this committee being an ad hoc committee to a standing committee and what our charge is.
Great.
Trish Riley.
Thanks, Emily. Let me just be as quick as I can be, but sort of set the stage. The discussions about the strategic plan are overdue. We do have as a board a responsibility to do strategic planning, and we're a little late, but I think that's great given the time that we're in. The initial initiative around this was a small committee, two former chairs, Jim Irwin, Mark Gardner, Jim Donnelly, and myself. The committee was then expanded. The Chancellor and his team have been active and eagerly engaged in all of this as we think about the future and getting something straight about, on paper, engaged with our stakeholders about where we're headed. And while it's a little bit overdue, it's very timely because we live, as we all know, in a period of extraordinary change and challenge. And there's great opportunity in challenge. And I think we have the leadership who can take that on and really forge the future, but we need to do it together. Obviously, we know the demographic shift that's so front and center to all our challenges, labor force changes, changing workforce needs, real competition for the work that we do. And we noted in the paper this weekend, somehow UNE has the largest incoming class it's ever had. What are they doing? What lessons might we learn from them? Infrastructure needs both people and places that we really have to think about as we move forward, and the importance of all of our universities. And first and foremost, the budget. Clearly, we have budget challenges. Clearly, we have needs, long deferred maintenance, real serious issues about sort of our infrastructure and capital needs. And candidly, the new Biden plan to offset loans, debt for our students, many of whom will be benefited given the numbers on Pell Grants. I think it's 43% of our student body have Pels. So this is clearly important. It's an important opportunity potentially to bring back those students who have some college and left. But it also has invited the question about the underlying costs of higher education. And incumbent upon us is to think about the strategic plan in ways that can define the future also around quality, affordability, costs, and efficiency, so that we can really make our case to the legislature for going forward. The strategic plan is a vehicle to engage all our communities, and I think we're particularly pleased that we've expanded this committee to include presidents, students, faculty, important voices. It's a community effort to get this strategic plan right and to make it a roadmap for the future. And I think we were really pleased to find in Huron a team with lots of bench strength, a former president of a university among them. They understand unified accreditation as a tool, but not a panacea. And I think I was particularly pleased that they had read each university's strategic plan and developed early on a matrix for us to compare those as a baseline to start. As I think about this work, we evenly have language issues. We've sometimes talked about the system and the universities. And I think in our strategic plan, we're thinking about a system of universities and how to strengthen that system and make it work collaboratively and as efficiently as possible. So much groundwork has been laid, as Huron, Peter and his team will point out, but we're really pleased that we have this broadened committee, and it's a permanent committee. Strategic planning too often is a document that sits on a shelf. In some institutions, I know the Chancellor is committed to making this a living, breathing document, and this committee will be there for the long term to talk about its implementation, to make sure we provide the necessary oversight and input, to make the strategic plan really an important document of change in a period of challenge and opportunity. So that's the nutshell.
Thank you so much, Trish. I really appreciate it. And are there any questions at this point before we transition over to Huron?
And Jim Donnelly has more history as well, and he may have more to add.
Trish, as usual, you summed everything up very well. And I will leave it at that since we have a full agenda, as our chair had said, but I appreciate the opportunity to just back you up on your thorough leadership and statement.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. And as we turn it over to Huron, I will just say this. Today we are really about getting us all to the same level of understanding of where we are, because each of us has played a different type of role, engaged in different levels of conversations or committees, or some people are completely new to this process. This committee will have regular meetings now ahead of board meetings, like all the other committees. The members of this committee cross a lot of other committees as well, which is an important perspective. It's deliberate on the part of Trish to make sure that we are always keeping all the elements in mind, whether that's academic student affairs, finance, facilities and technology, HR and other committees. And we're really pleased that so many people from the system office can join us too, because this is intended to be a living, breathing document in the end, and a living, breathing process along the way that takes all of us. So I'm going to turn it over now to our friends from Huron. Peter, I'm guessing I'm turning it over to you. This is a long section of this agenda, but we're going to talk about the procedure, the planning process that we've done before today. We're going to review and discuss the themes and the preliminary goals that have already been established by the prior ad hoc committee, and the proposed planning and fall activities and next steps timeline. So Peter, turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Trustee Kane, and thank you also, Chair Riley. So very much as Trustee Kane was just suggesting, our goal today is to bring everyone up to date on all of our prior activities and to retrace our steps to a certain extent. So some of you will be familiar with some of the material that we'll review today, but hopefully for the others who are just coming into this conversation, this is a helpful orientation to the work that has been undertaken. And of course, we'll also talk a little bit about some of the next steps to follow. So we do have some slides that we can pull up. I think our introductions have probably been sufficient for the moment. Our colleague Kate Garbodi-Grant is not with us today, but you will certainly have the opportunity to spend some time with her in the near future. If we turn to the next slide, I do just want to say a few words about the interesting features of system level strategic planning. I think for many of us, the notion of organizational or institutional university strategic planning is probably a familiar one. It's not quite as familiar at the system level, and very much as Chair Riley was suggesting, when we say system, we mean a few things. We mean the system office, we mean the individual universities, and of course, we mean all of those things functioning as one organism. And so we'll want to keep those three sorts of notions of systemness in mind as we go forward. And we're going to have to think about, well, given the sort of the common features of university planning, how can we leverage some of that experience and reflect on this sort of collective effort at planning? So I think that there are a few things that we strive to do when we think about system level planning. One of those is to undertake some visioning in the context of the current realities of the marketplace. And so we've already heard a few of those enumerated: the demographics, the economic realities, of course, all of the educational activities that the various universities within the system have, pronounced strengths in, and so forth. And also, as Chair Riley was just suggesting, some of the infrastructure matters that need to be addressed for the future of each of the universities in the system. One of the most challenging aspects of this, I think, is adopting a mindset of system-wide stewardship for the future of all of the universities in the system. So in a sense, there's a kind of a shared destiny for each of these universities. And we want to be thinking about how, as a system, these universities can collaborate to ensure a sustainable future for all. So that's one of the critical elements of all of this. And so that means that planning can help us to think about how best to deploy the academic resources, the research assets, in order to assist each university in the system to best serve its own students. And of course, students at institution A may have a somewhat different profile to those at institution B. And we need to be thinking about the particular needs of all students in the state of Maine and how this system can best serve them. Of course, the emphasis is always going to be on quality. The emphasis is always going to be a deep commitment to the long-standing tradition of quality education in the state of Maine. So that's first and foremost. But planning also creates an opportunity for collective reflection on that institutional history, on that system history, as well as on the current environmental context and the alignment of the system to the future, as well as, of course, the future of each individual university in it. The system office also, of course, has a role to play here in defining how the system office can continue to serve each of the system's universities is a part of this work as well. Every organization, every organism needs to continue to grow and refine, react to the stimuli in its environment and adapt. And that's true for the system office, just as it is for each of the universities in the system. If we turn to the next slide, just wanted to highlight some of the different kinds of benefits of engaging in strategic planning. And there are a couple of things that are important from our perspective, and I'm sure there are many things that are important from your perspective. So as Trustee Kane says, we're happy to have some dialogue about your thoughts, comments, and questions as we go forward. But a couple issues that are important to us. One, we try to make a distinction between outputs. That's the plan, which won't sit on the shelf. We want that plan to actually inform decisions, resource allocation, prioritization of effort, investment of time, money, and people to progress down certain pathways that are going to help sustain individual universities and the system as a whole. So the outputs of this process include the strategic plan, a roadmap for execution. Those are, of course, vital deliverables in the course of this collaboration. But it's also important that we think about diverse outcomes. So in other words, there are cultural benefits that we want to yield from this process. There are ways in which this process creates an occasion for communication across the system, gives everyone a chance to participate in thinking about the future of these universities and the system as a whole. And that provides an opportunity for all of us to model leadership, commitment, and stewardship. Again, for individual institutions and also for the system as a whole. So we want to be thinking about both those things that result from this process, but also those other kinds of impact that are just as important. And so we have to give great care to the design of how we engage and how we execute this process so that we realize the best of both the outputs and the outcomes. The other thing that's important, of course, so that this plan doesn't just sit on a shelf, is that the priorities that we articulate through this collective reflection focus on matters of great relevance to the citizens of the state of Maine, to the universities that comprise this system, and to all of the faculty, staff, and students that are engaged with those universities. So we want to be thinking about how we can best produce the educational outcomes that are going to lead to lives of enrichment and professional fulfillment and economic development for the state. So we have to be thinking about the kinds of impact that education can generate for individual learners and also for the state as a whole. And of course, there are risks of inaction. We know that the demographic slope is against us here in the Northeast. We know that the costs of operating university continue to rise, and we know that the infrastructure doesn't maintain itself. So there are lots of reasons why we have to focus on the intelligent deployment of our resources as we go forward so that we can best utilize those resources to achieve our collective goals. If we turn to the next slide, one of the other sort of philosophical principles that's important to us and that I think can be helpful to all of you as you reflect on the future opportunities for the system is to make a distinction between what we might think of as the near-term horizon in the state of Maine. So we might think about the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then what we might think about as the longer-term horizon. So say years 5, 7, 10, looking out further. We know quite a lot about the current state of the universities within the system, about the economic context in the state of Maine, demography and all the rest of it, the labor market. So with a pretty high degree of confidence, we can predict not only what the end of 2022 is going to look like, but we can be fairly confident about what 2023 is going to look like, and even 2024 and perhaps another year out. We have some concrete and predictive information that we can use to make those judgments. If we started asking ourselves, well, how's the environment going to look in 2030 or 2032 or 2033? Well, we don't have a data set on 2030 or 2033. So we instead have to be thinking about speculation and scenario planning. And we're relying on a different kind of information. We're relying on our experience and our know-how to anticipate how the environment might evolve. And so one of the things that we want to do through this process is simultaneously focus on the present forward planning that we can do based on the data that we have about the current state, as well as through a consideration of some future scenarios. What might it mean to work from the future back, to reverse engineer what we think that future state could be, and how do we leverage the core capabilities of the system to not only succeed next year and the year after that, but also to succeed a decade from now? And what capabilities do we need to develop between now and then in order to be prepared to succeed in that future state as well? So there's some projections that we need to be thinking about. And again, the information sets that we have for the near term and the long term are different. And so those are, in a sense, different kinds of problems to solve. And I think it's helpful if we don't conflate them. If we pull them apart, we're able to plan with a bit more efficacy. Next up, we also just wanted to highlight that we see strategic plans traditionally, and this is, of course, not a rule of law. There's plenty of opportunity for tailoring here, but there are a number of common constituent elements of a good, healthy strategic plan. So often there is an articulation of the mission of the system, of the vision of the future state for the system over, say, 3 years, 7 years, 10 years. How do we see that vision evolving over time? And there is often, but not always, a statement of the key values that represent the commitments of the participants in the system and that really model behavioral expectations for folks. And so, what are the values that are driving our decision making and the kind of quality education and research that we're delivering and undertaking? So those are really the things that are, generally speaking, already in place when a planning process starts. But as you go through this reflection, what should arise is a set of emerging priorities. And through some of the stakeholder engagement that we've already begun, we're by no means done with that work, but through the work that we have already begun, we're already starting to see some emerging themes, and we can share some of those with you in a little bit. But ultimately, we're going to want to reflect on and improve upon and refine those priorities to make sure that these really are the top concerns for the system and that we have the resources to deploy to help advance our aims down each of those areas. It's also important to be thinking about creating an opportunity statement. So for a particular priority, why is this important? We also then want to have some specific goals or tactics that we are going to pursue in order to realize that priority. And so that's the what we are going to do. And then we have some initiatives within those general descriptions that are specific things we'll engage in that will enable us to realize measurable results in those areas. And then ultimately, those measures are the ways that we can track and report on our progress and ultimately enable us to, where necessary, triage problems if in fact we're not making the progress that we'd hope to along our prescribed timeline, but also enable us to celebrate those successes that we are achieving and to provide rewards and recognitions to the teams and individuals that are helping to contribute to the realization of those objectives. So again, these are not platonic ideals necessarily, but these are common features of a traditional plan, and we can adapt these to our own preferences as we go forward. And then
Can I just do a quick check to make sure no one has questions? Just wanted to do a little quick check before we. Okay, seem good. Proceed.
Great, thank you. So just one more exploration of some of that taxonomy work here, and then I'll hand off to my colleague Kathy to carry us forward a little bit. if we think about a strategic priority, let's just take an example here. We might say the student experience. And so there might be a variety of initiatives, some of which might already be in flight, underway, could even be long-standing projects that are about commitment to student experience and student success. Some might be new or emerging, or some might be ideas that we haven't yet defined, but which we hope to pursue in the future. So we have this priority area, the student experience and success, and then we will have some initiatives. So it might be initiatives around equity inclusion, or teaching and mentoring, or innovative delivery of educational programs. But then we also want to have some specific measures. And so we might, for example, do some counting and measure the diversity of students, faculty, and staff within each university across the system. We might measure student satisfaction with their programs on some routine basis. We might also look at the level of alumni engagement, which can be measured by donor participation, among many other prospective measures. And we might, for example, also look at the frequency with which faculty are engaging in professional development to help advance their own preparedness for teaching or other matters related to their professional work. So as we go forward, we will want to commit to that system-wide mission, to refine the vision for what we see over the next 3, 7, 10 years, and to be thinking about the values that are going to be driving our effort. And then we're also going to want to define priorities, think about the initiatives that will enable us to realize those priorities, and define some success measures so that we will be able to track our success relative to those goals. So we can certainly pause there, see if there are any questions at this point. And if not, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kathy, to talk a little bit about some of our prior work.
Thanks, Peter. Any questions? Anybody? Okay. Well, if you think of something as I go.
I see Trustee Alexander, Barbara.
Ah, yes. Trustee Alexander.
Thank you. I don't have any question about the overall approach, which is obviously well underway. In the issue of actually setting goals and objectives and creating metrics to monitor compliance or achievement and identifying gaps, I am often interested in institutions of this type. And by that, I mean large public institutions. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved here, a lot of different competing priorities, and all of that is perfectly natural and no doubt actually healthy to the development of new ideas and bubbling up new things that might not have been thought of. But at some point, there needs to be some incentives and possibly penalties for the inability to achieve, or the failure, or the inability to achieve goals and objectives. And I'll be interested, as this plan develops, how we can build that into our system to actually provide a means of assuring that if we have consensus and we have a plan, how are we going to develop the tools to hold people accountable for achieving the plan? Thank you.
Well, that's a very helpful comment. And of course, one of the reasons why we do measure progress is so that we can hold ourselves accountable to realizing the goals that we have defined. And there's a lot that we can say about the structures and governance that can help to ensure that that accountability is in place. And to a certain extent, the resources that are allocated to advance priorities, those are some of the incentives, but there should also be other softer incentives like rewards and recognition, as I mentioned. So there's a whole array of different things that we should be thinking about in the incentives category. And likewise, we should also be thinking about the consequences for missing goals, missing timelines. And so accountability is, of course, a critical issue. You're absolutely right. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah, that's a great comment. It's actually a great segue to the what can be dry topic that I'm going to cover, which is where we've been, but where we're going forward. Trustee Alexander, I believe you mentioned the word consensus. And yes, you need to put in incentives and align resources appropriately. But a big part of this process is focused on getting important stakeholder groups understanding the importance, the current state, help to shape the vision for the future, and driving towards consensus, which of course we all understand doesn't mean necessarily 100% agreement, but it does mean understanding. And with that, that goes a long way often towards actually executing appropriately on a strategic plan. So let me take it from there. What I'm going to do is touch on where we've been a little bit, but more importantly, what the fall looks like, and most importantly, get your input as to the direction we're headed in the next few months, and make sure that we hear you as far as a gut check on your reaction to process and content, etc. So we began working with the University of Maine system back in January, and it's amazing to me that it's coming up on a fall already. What we did at the beginning of our process in winter of 2022, and then through the spring and most of this summer, is do a few things. One is really establish a fact base for Mainers, for the University of Maine system stakeholders to really understand the reality of where we are today. Brenna's going to touch on what we now call the fact book, which we are in the process of updating a bit. But it's an attempt to ground people in a shared reality of what's happening, which is often a critical first step that's sometimes missing. There's disagreement on where we are, and how do you determine where we need to go if you don't understand where we are. We also spent quite a bit of time talking to stakeholders, both in small groups, individuals, and some of these were done remotely. And we actually had a really helpful set of visits to each university throughout the spring semester. In a minute, I'll talk a little bit about what we plan to do in the fall, similar kind of process, but to build off of what we did in the spring. May was a busy month. We had a discussion with the Board of Trustees, and we also met in person with a group called the Strategic Planning Working Group. So the governance of this process has been, there's a few important groups. This group, critically important from a stewardship level, thinking about strategic planning. The President's Council, another critically important group we want to talk to you a little bit about in a minute. And then also a strategic planning working group, which is a collection of great thought leaders from across the system that have been advising on the directions we need to take, and also providing insight as to what their university people are thinking, and how we might approach messaging, but also engagement. So we met with both of those groups in May, and then over the summer, we've been doing a lot of pulling initial themes together, which Brenda's going to talk to you a little bit, connecting with some external stakeholders. It's really important to hear from people outside the immediate system, whether they be elected officials or corporate people, etc., and bring it all together in planning for the fall. So that's where we've been. Now, as we think about important next steps for the future, we are updating the data book. I want to talk to you now about a little bit of our process we're planning for in the fall, and focus on opportunities and emerging themes. So Brent, if we could go to the next slide. This one's a little bit hard to read, but we are still in August, thank goodness, for what, 3 more days, something like that. And we're talking to you today, which is great, which is a really important kickoff to the fall planning process. Tomorrow, actually, we're meeting with the Strategic Planning Working Group again, and bringing them up to speed as to where everything is and getting their thoughts. September and October, we're planning to go back to each of the universities for visits. As mentioned, we had some really good initial engagement in the spring with each university. There's an opportunity now to go back and share both what we've heard and build off of that. reinforce the shared reality. So I'm going to talk, I believe on the next slide, a little bit about our approach, and I would love your input on that. But that's going to take quite a bit of time, and that will happen in September and October. Also, most importantly, in September, we want to engage the President's Council. We have a few new presidents there, in a deep dive with the presidents about, again, the shared reality, but more important, the emerging future vision, to try and drive consensus among these people who know their universities really well and know their universities best on how these themes are starting to come together. So that's a 3-part discussion that I'll touch on. And then you see in November and December, we're going to bring everything back, certainly update the board by December as to where we are. So next slide talks a little bit about that stakeholder engagement approach. Our approach is, number one, to listen first, but it's also to inform. And we've collected a lot of rich data, not just through the data book, but also through the many discussions we've had. And we will bring that together, we will share that out, and we will build on that to start informing the priorities and the themes, and even some of the actual initiatives that stakeholders think are most important. So there, you can see a number of the different stakeholder groups on the left. A number of these will, I think actually all of these, as I look at this again, will be groups we intend to meet with when we visit each of the universities. I'm going to stop right now because I would love your input and your initial reaction to both this set of visits and how we can best engage universities. Do you think this is the right tone? Are there specific things we should be probing for, watching for? Any suggestions or reactions to visiting each of these universities in the fall? Understanding falls are crazy busy. What's that?
Can you pull the slide down so we can see everybody?
Yes, please.
That's great. I will just say, for me, I am a believer that the process in strategic planning is as important as the outcome. That you get a better outcome when people believe and feel truly that they're part of the process and have faith in the process, that it's been as transparent as possible. And I think that we have already established that, particularly with the online resources and the data book, but I think this is all in the continued spirit of that. I also wanted to welcome Carolyn to the meeting that I saw her join.
Oh, there's Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the Chancellor encouraging and endorsing a kind of a combination way to get university stakeholder input. So in the spring, we did a lot of joint discussion with faculty, staff, and students on each campus. Now in the fall, we, Huron, will go back and bring that back, just us this time, to continue to get honest dialogue going and build off of that to a productive consensus on where we are. Other comments?
Yeah, I just want to see who's joined us by phone. I just want to know.
Ending in 2394.
It's Roger Cates, Emily.
Trustee Cates. Hello, Roger. I just want to make sure we all can't see you. So I wanted to make sure we all know who's on the line with us this morning. Welcome.
No, good morning, and I'm sorry I'm late. Thank you.
It's all right. Professor Otto, I see your hand up.
So one comment that I will make is it may be very worthwhile not to have like the staff and faculty at the same meeting, because what we have found is at times the faculty or the staff may be less likely to participate when the faculty are there, or the faculty may dominate the conversation. And so it may not give the staff quite as clear of a choice or quite the option to state what their thoughts are.
Professor Otto, I think that's really good feedback. And I see Presidents Rice and Mundy nodding their heads yes. Absolutely. Our thought is that we will, I believe we're talking about 2 solid days at each university, and that will be an opportunity to engage each group. And then our hope is to have a town hall at the end, sharing back what we've heard from the various groups and getting further input.
And I will say that from a process standpoint, the specifics of the visits are still being worked out as part of the contract process, that with the system office and Trish is working on that as well. So just wanted to say that, but this is the general framework we are hoping to achieve this fall.
Yeah, and towards that end, I'm happy to interface with the campuses and to make sure that we can make these visits for you work. Obviously, I'll be visiting the campuses separately in keeping with my commitment to be on every campus every semester, or at least the 2 primary semesters of the year. Although this year I also hit them all over the summer as well. So we'll have to discuss that a little bit further, but I think that this is spot on with respect to the desire to continue to have a flow where people feel that their voices are being heard and are interacting. So we can follow up. I'll follow up with the Huron people, and I know Rowena will help interface with the campuses as well. Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Let's go to Trustee Loring, and then we'll go to President Franny Mundy.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have direct communication with both faculty and staff and students. But I think it's just as important to show that we not only actually are there listening to them and that we are truly listening, but I wonder how we're going to prove that, we're taking them seriously. Is there something a plan of follow-up that to show them that we're really hearing what they're telling us?
Great comment, and absolutely. So our follow-up and hearing will start actually during the visit. The goal is to have a town hall session at the end. Presumably it might be a mix of remote as well as in person, where we can share back what we heard during the visit. But throughout this process, we actually capture all of the input in a way that reflects on what we've heard. Now, clearly not every comment ends up making it into the strategic plan. I think people understand that, but the general themes do reflect what we hear from each individual, and an important stakeholder group. The other thing I'd mention as far as getting stakeholder input is we do have a website that permits people to be constantly feeding in information, and we reflect on those. And when we go back out and we talk to different groups and individuals, we say, this is what we've seen and what we've heard. So the idea is by the end of this process, people see in the outcome their input. Again, maybe not a specific recommendation because they're often in conflict and we don't do everything and people have to set priorities and not everything will happen, but they do feel heard because it's reflected there. Yes, President Franny Mundy.
President Franny Mundy, and then President Rice.
Thanks. I think this plan for the visits and the conversations on campus sounds fantastic, and I think it's critical to really having the level of input that we need for this plan. A couple of thoughts. I think your slide, it's your second slide. Well, it's numbers. I don't know what number it is. Anyway, it's the one that's titled, "What is System Strategic Planning?" I think it's going to be very important, perhaps for you or for us on the campuses, to help in advance to frame your visits around what that means. Because there are so many planning efforts going on our campuses that the particulars of a system planning effort will be unevenly familiar to people who are here with us. So getting that clear so that you get the most relevant input. But that said, there are lots of other planning efforts going on. Campuses have their own strategic planning that's often a continuous process. We have a NECHI site visit coming up for our unified accreditation in this time period. So there will be a lot of preparation for that. The Chancellor will be visiting and talking to folks, and then your visit. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to give input, and I wonder if we could design a way for at least the input that comes out of the Huron visit that might be very campus specific, for example, for us to more formally make sure that that also can feed into ongoing campus strategic planning work. So that if people have comments that aren't particularly relevant to system strategic planning, that they can make their way to these other different kinds of efforts that also are underway, so that we try to help people distinguish, but also recognize that their thoughts are getting heard across a multiple set of efforts, a set of multiple efforts.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, and absolutely. We'll take what we have heard and share it back with the presidents, and back with the communities if we think some of that input is more appropriate to plug into a different process. We're also well aware of how busy campuses are so busy in general in the fall. Many of us who have spent many years on campuses understand that. And then especially with NECHI and the important work Jeff and others are doing, and the fact that the Chancellor is visiting, we know it's a lot for people. So we're very grateful that people are going to carve it out. I love the idea of starting with this, what is a system strategic plan? Maybe there's even a visual where we can show how this plugs in, how all these activities work together. I know we have some narrative around that, but maybe there's a way we can graphically show that. So it's a great suggestion.
I think that's a great point. And also because the campus strategic plans are really important, and
Yeah.
each campus needs to have that too. Professor Scott, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was kind of curious. President Friendly brought forward a really critical issue about the campus strategic plans. And I did not hear earlier in your presentation how you are addressing the campus strategic plans to inform the system strategic plan. And what's actually going to take place when you're on campus?
Just a coffee, please. Thank you.
When
Roger,
you're
you can mute yourself, Roger.
I'm sorry, pardon me.
Thank you. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, when you're on campus, the reality is that most of the faculty and staff are going to be thinking about their campuses. And they probably really won't have that sort of insight into a system strategic plan. So either you provide the context clearly for them to think about, or leverage the campus conversations to how they see their future. And hopefully that will help to inform the system strategic plan.
Also great comments. Yes, when we did our spring visit, that was very clear. You may have heard Peter, I believe, mention that one of the things we did when we launched this project was to go through each of the university's strategic plans. And we actually pulled out common themes and elements as a launching point for thinking about the system strategic plan. What are some of the most important elements that have come out of the strategic plans in each university? Now, they're very different. They were done at different times. Some of them are more depth than others, but having a sensitivity and awareness about what each university thinks is important is critically important. I agree with you. It's context, and it's an important place to start when we speak with people on each campus. So thank you for that. Professor Rice?
President
I'm sorry, President Rice.
Oh, professor's fine too. That warms the cockles of my heart.
Sometimes that's better, right?
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of comments made previously. Chair Kane noted that the process is as important as the product, which I couldn't agree more with. And that's why I do like the process that you're taking here, particularly because this is all reflecting, I think, an important culture, learning experience, and shift. Unified accreditation that was mentioned by President Freeney-Mundy and others is itself a cultural shift. It's not just a process level shift or a functionary shift. And I don't think that is fully understood. So part of this strategic plan for a system of universities, I think, is a really critical cultural shift for the University of Maine system and the people of the state of Maine, actually, to understand that as this moves forward. So that's why I think this is a really important foundation for what literally the future of the University of Maine system will be. All you have to do is look at some of our fellow university systems in Northern New England and what they're going through as to, I think, what we want to have as a culture to avoid some of the difficulties that we're seeing happening in some other places.
Thank you. Well said.
I think this is this conversation also is a good way to think about some of the resetting we probably have to do at the campus visits this fall, of like all of the different pieces that are moving and that they all have an important role to play. But this is a specific system strategic planning as sort of an on the balcony piece to all of it. And those are really all those comments really effectively built on one another.
Yeah, I know we need to move on, but Peter mentioned strategic planning output versus outcomes, and that's what you're all talking about. The outcomes is starting to shift the culture and the way people are thinking about this, and that's why the more face-to-face engagement we all have and talk these things through, more impactful the plan is going to be at the end of the day. So I know we're just about out of time, and Brenda's got some important stuff to cover. Let's just go to my last slide. Just as important, in my opinion, as these university visits is engaging in a really deep and meaningful way on this topic with the President's Council. As you know, we've got a couple of new people there, which is exciting, really great group of people. So we have proposed and are gearing up to launch a set of 3 topics. It really interactive, deep discussions among the presidents about each of these 3. So in September, we're going to be talking about, again, starting with reaffirming the current realities. And that's both qualitative and quantitative. Having worked at universities for quite some time, both are critically important. And getting your campus leaders together to talk this through is really important because there's a shared reality there, and you sometimes don't see it as a president of a university. You're kind of on your own. And so thinking together about what that shared reality looks like, the common issues as well as the individual issues, is very important. So that's topic number 1. Topic number 2 starts driving towards where do we want to go. And the goal here is we would get through much of this in September. Again, thinking back to how busy campuses are and universities are and what presidents have on their plates, we're going to push hard. And then the third piece, which we will come back together for, would be that driving towards consensus. What are those transformative opportunities we need to be thinking about for the future? We were very much hoping to do an in-person format that spanned a couple of days to get through topics 1 and 2. It looks like calendars aren't quite going to be in alignment for that. I think we will kick it off with an in-person lengthy discussion, but probably not spanning a few days. So before I turn this over to Brenna, any comments from either the presidents on this call or anybody else on approach? Or
we've got 3 presidents on this call, at least, I believe, because President Zakis was here as well. So,
yeah. And we have spoken with the presidents on the call, so I think they're in alignment with it. I know, again, the Chancellor has been really supportive of this, these important conversations, so that's appreciated. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it to Brenna, so we can start going through what some of the things we've heard of today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And good morning again to everyone. I'm going to be leading us through this 3rd topic, which is to review our themes to date and our preliminary, and I'll underscore that word preliminary, goals. We're about 9 months into a 16-month about process. So we're excited to get your feedback on some of the goals that have arisen to date. In terms of where we are obtaining the information for these preliminary goals and areas of focus, you may recall the slide that Peter walked us through. That was the strategic plan taxonomy. That taxonomy is not set in stone. We could think about it as sort of wet cement of the principal components of the strategic plan. But this slide really depicts the inputs that go into finalizing or setting those strategic plan components in place. So one of those pieces is an internal data analysis effort. So we did a pretty robust analysis of the University of Maine system. And the output of that is the data book. And Trustee Kane had a nice recommendation of actually showing you where that lives. So I'll pull my screen down in just a second and navigate there. It's fairly easy, posted right on the strategic plan website. As part of that, we also did an external scan of future higher education market trends. And this is sort of a continuous process. You know, trends as of January 2022, and these evolve, right? They've evolved over the past 8 months, and we'll continue to keep our thumbprint on looking at what's happening in the market currently, so that we can predict to some degree of relevance the future trends. And I think that as Peter walked through in the dual transformation, right, there are data sets that we can look to think about the future trends happening in higher education. The second component is internal and external stakeholder engagement. I'm going to share a bit of the themes that we've heard from our internal stakeholder engagement thus far. Prior to visiting each of the universities in the spring, we did about 55 internal stakeholder sessions remotely via Zoom. We had a series of individual interviews and focus groups. Over the summer, we have actually been meeting with external stakeholders. So we'll share with you some of the themes from those conversations, which have been very useful. And then a really important aspect is also feedback from our governing groups. So Kathy mentioned the 3 governing groups that are helping to inform this process. This is the Board of Trustees, this committee, now this formal strategic plan board committee, the Strategic Planning Working Group, which is made of thought leaders, and also the President's Council. So through these various stages, we are bringing information to these governing groups, and then your feedback and your thoughts on these calls is very, very useful. In terms of the data book, this is really the table of contents for about a 50-page material book that depicts the internal and external viewpoints of the important data points that are going to inform this strategic plan. One of the things that we are hoping to do in the fall is actually align on a series of key messages and talking points that could ground us as to the urgency to address some of these data pieces. And so I mentioned I will just show you quickly here where this data book is living in case you'd like to actually visit it. I think you all may have
or
links.
send it to your friends to look at. Send it out. Go ahead.
Yep. So this is the University of Maine System Strategic Plan website. And the strategic plan data book is this 4th tile right here. And it takes you to the link of our data book. The first slide provides some guidelines for use. This has the contents, that same slide that we were just looking at, and it actually provides a pretty helpful framework to digest a very long slide deck, right? So these are the trend topics that also guide us through the book. On the upper left, you can see the relevant category by which this information lies. So there are things, and Trish and Peter mentioned them in some of their comments, right? There are demographic changes, there are enrollment realities that need to ground our thinking for the strategic plan. So you can see this one here. I'll just go through a few of these key highlights. I think it's helpful to see the pictures rather than the text on a slide. Right, you can see that over 2012 to 2021, the University of Maine system total enrollment declined by 11%. And then we depict that same trend line for each of the universities here. And so what does this mean? It means that the University of Maine system, and just to let you know, the implications, right, for the system and how we see some of these implications, there may be others that come to mind for you as implications, but we've depicted those on the bottom of each slide of sort of what does this mean, right? And what we've laid out here is that the University of Maine system continues to experience a decline in fall enrollment, like many institutions in the Northeast and nationally. But to maintain the mission of serving residents of Maine and their local communities, collaboration in the spirit of sustainability is really critical. And so we could kind of go through and we break down some of the enrollment by ethnicity, gender, first generation. We have a helpful slide here about the adult learner opportunity, which has been a big theme in our qualitative data analysis, right? In many of the conversations that we've had, a lot of people have pointed to the fact that we can't just rely on traditional aged students. There are a lot of adult learners in the state that we may better serve. And that could be a really great opportunity for the University of Maine system. I was going to point out here, we have a bullet point on the implication slide that you all received in advance about academics. And these two slides here, 18 and 19, provide the academic portfolio across the system, both the bachelor's degrees and the graduate degrees. So you can see the yellow bars here are the 5-year average in the big bucketed categories of academic portfolio. And then the blue line is the 5-year percent change. So you can see that over the past 5 years, humanities and business were the highest in terms of volume, but clearly computer science has the highest percent change over 5 years from a bachelor's degree standpoint with 12%. And similarly with graduate degrees, the largest percent change over 5 years is computer science across the system, 147%, and business is in second place with 121%. But in terms of volume, the largest volume here is in education for graduate degrees. The other piece that we have an implications call out on that slide is in regards to economics and research. This slide on 21, I think, is a really helpful slide to define both the current industries in Maine and the future industries in Maine. So the top 5 industries in the full state in Maine are healthcare, government, retail, tourism, and manufacturing. And then we go through a little bit of a regional breakdown because there's different industries in different parts of the state. As we look at the future industries in Maine, and this has actually been a really big theme that many of our external stakeholders have pointed to, the Maine Economic Development Strategy. And this report outlines a lot of really helpful things. One of which is a description of the future industries in Maine and how we might change some of our strategies around the workforce development and economic development to align to what these future industries might be. And they call out bio-based alternatives. They talk about responsible food sources and technologies, artificial intelligence growth. Connect Maine will facilitate universal availability of broadband. I know that there are many on this call that are working on that really exciting initiative. So this is a helpful piece that you might all want to look at. And this next slide goes into a little bit more detail on the future industries and economic outlook in a similar fashion to that graduate portfolio. So that is just a brief overview of the data book and where to find it. I know that Trustee Kane also wanted me to point out while we're here, just where to find that comment box. Kathy mentioned that there's an effort where we're having engagement sessions, both in person and via Zoom. There's also a mechanism to receive feedback throughout the strategic planning process whenever someone wants to share. And that actually is lived in this get involved, the very first tile here, get involved picture of maybe some medical students, nursing students. And it's a questionnaire where you can actually submit your questions, your name, and any feedback that you have. So this is where this is found. As of July, we had 40 responses to this. I do think that in our communication strategy that we've worked with the Chancellor and his team on, we have some communications that we've outlined for the fall, and that might be a really nice time to remind stakeholders of that availability to share their feedback. So moving on, or sorry, Trustee King, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to see if anyone had questions because that was a lot about the data book and the feedback form. Yep, Trustee Loring, Donna.
Yeah, I just want to say that if people want to make comments, that first where you click on get involved, I don't think it's clear that you can make comments there. So people may just breeze by that.
That's good feedback. I don't know where maybe there's a way we can make it a little more, provide feedback here.
Right.
We want your comments. It's good. That's a good feedback from a web perspective. I'm not sure who owns the design on that website, but it's that's a good flag that it isn't clear.
I actually agree with that and was thinking the same thing. So I will take that as an action item and go back to Kim Marie Jenkins. I think she's helping to drive some of the formatting.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions or thoughts about this section? All right, Brenna, go ahead.
All right. So we went through the data book just again as alignment to kind of share what's there. I'll now speak to some of the themes that we have heard from our stakeholder engagement. So throughout our process, I mentioned we had about 50 to 60 remote discussions. Then we visited each of the universities and had a faculty focus group, a staff focus group, a cabinet focus group, and a student focus group. And there were themes that came out of each of those discussions. I am going to touch on a few in each of these categories. In terms of strengths, a number one strength that people point to when asked what are the strengths of the system is the state of Maine and the assets, the physical assets that exist in terms of the distinct geography, resources, and industries that people believe that contribute to making Maine an ideal location for scholarship, teaching, and research. The University of Maine system universities are embedded in local communities and economies across the state that provide access to diverse and unparalleled educational experiences. And so that strength can really be leveraged, people believe, as a priority for the future and just how we could tap onto the state's assets in terms of curricular and non-curricular educational experiences. Another strength that people point to is connectedness. People talk about the familiar nature of the interconnected state of Maine and the student-centric communities that people really care about students. And some of those connections allow for direct and relatively easy access to state leaders and small businesses, allowing for students and faculty to enhance their educational learning and research opportunities in ways that perhaps other states don't have that same level of connectedness to allow for quick wins and quick kind of connection points for students to various internship opportunities, et cetera. Research and development is another one that people point to as a strength. The University of Maine system has a high volume of research in partnership with the state. Of course, the University of Maine's R1 designation was a huge milestone and allows for new and wide-ranging research opportunities, while also supporting universities acting like local think tanks. Economic and cultural engines. This is one that people point to and is related to the piece that I shared of why I'm really proud to be working on this process. That the universities in the state of Maine are economic and cultural drivers in their local communities. They really serve as anchors to those local communities. And they enable deep partnerships for economic development, workforce pipelines, and community building. Moving on to the challenges. Demographic declines. This has been mentioned several times in this call, but the University of Maine system faces a demographic cliff of traditional age students, which is also exacerbated by marketplace competition and some declining interest in a four-year education. A shrinking demography also poses challenging implications for state funding as the number of taxpayers decrease, according to many stakeholders. Some people also point to financial sustainability. that the University of Maine system relies on a stabilization fund to subsidize operating deficits across declining enrollments. And many stakeholders just simply desire a system where they can rely on finances in a more sustainable fashion. Campus autonomy versus one university is on here. You'll see one university is in quotes because some people don't know if that is a word that they should use. They've heard it before. Some people actually really love that motto and pointed to it as something they wish was used more. So there's sort of this tension there, I would say. Several stakeholders envision a structure where they have an equal voice and individual autonomy balanced with system support. Others have actually talked about really wanting a fully integrated, centralized structure where everyone focuses on the effective whole to promote future success. In terms of priorities, and you could actually kind of draw a line, right, from strengths that could be leveraged or challenges that need to be addressed in order to get to some of these strategic priorities. But one of the priorities that people mention is cost efficiency. So as the University of Maine flexes to align with supply and demand, the system must develop cost efficiencies across the system to support future sustainability and deliver on its mission. It's a both and. Adult market is listed there as a fourth bullet point. I mentioned that as we were looking at the data book. Many believe that the University of Maine system is missing an opportunity to tap more deeply into the adult market. This could be done by scaling existing assets and programs. And some people talk about the centers that exist at UMA as a way to bring more adults in. People have also talked about the University of Maine Presque Isle Your Pace program provides one idea of an initiative of how to engage adults more robustly. Workforce development, this is a piece that people say, you know, as the system, and this is one of those perhaps areas of emphasis that could exist more at the system level than at the university level. But when asked what should be the priorities for the University of Maine system, people say to ensure that our workforce needs are being met, that the system has a view, an umbrella view that could really connect the educational offerings with the economic and workforce needs of our state, and the system should be the player in making that all happen. One of the quotes that kind of summarizes that well is the system's priority should be to meet the needs of Maine by producing graduates that will meet the workforce needs of the state. And then role of the system office. There are different thoughts around what the level of governance and autonomy of the system office should be. I think many people, the second bullet point, believe that the system should be the advocacy for higher education and the storyteller of impact across the state. And that is kind of many stakeholders in conversations pointed to that. And also being clear about what the vision and the statewide objectives should be, but allowing room for local, regional, and community-based solutions to those statewide objectives. Any questions on any of that?
And I'd love to just point out at USM President Jackie Edmondson has also joined us for the meeting today.
Great, welcome. All right. Well, then I will quickly hit on some of these external stakeholder themes. As I mentioned, we've had a series of great conversations over the summer. We were able to meet with Representative Teresa Pierce, Representative Rebecca Millett, Paul Stearns, the Greg Powell from the Herald Foundation. We met with Live and Work Maine, the Maine State of Chamber of Commerce, and Educate Maine. The full list is actually located in the appendix. But we heard a lot of similar themes from internal stakeholders, which was encouraging that, you know, that there is some level of alignment in some of the major strengths and the major areas of challenge and opportunity. So the workforce, several of the conversations mentioned this Maine Economic Development Strategy Report and just the importance of staying lockstep in the great work that was already put together to set a plan, 2020 to 2029, I believe, for Maine economic development. And that the University of Maine system has a great part to play in the economic development priorities of the state, and that the system strategic plan should really be in alignment with that plan. So that was encouraging because as part of the data book analysis, that was already on our radar, but I would say the external stakeholder voice really underscored or highlighted the importance of that alignment. Student success, people talked about leveraging technology and unified accreditation. Many external stakeholders did understand and know about the unified accreditation process at a high level. And they talked about a priority in establishing clear pathways to completion for learners at all stages of their degree and credential attainment. In terms of challenges, many of the external stakeholders talked about communications and this kind of notion of system storytelling of impact. They thought it would be really useful if there was a big effort for the system to describe the offerings and the impact, again, of the full system, so that Mainers and people outside of Maine could understand what all exists under the University of Maine system and how that is contributing to the betterment of lives across the state. They also talked about collaboration, noting that the system must work collaboratively together to set common goals and shift the culture from one of competition, both internally and externally, and move it to one of greater collaboration. They pointed to some different tensions that they've noticed exist across the system, and they think it's time for collaboration to really be focused on. In terms of the role of the system, vision and branding, this would be similar to many of the comments that I've already mentioned, and then fiscal sustainability. I think it's clear to the external voice that we need to be focused on ensuring a financially sustainable system. So as we pull all of that together, we have actually begun to outline here priority areas in gray, and then example goals under each of the big priority areas. And what we'd love to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes here is get your reaction. I am actually going to pause for a bit and let you read through these priority areas and goals, because these two slides are now the summary of the stakeholder engagement, internal and external, that we have done thus far, the implications coming from the data book, a lot of the feedback that we have heard from the three governing groups, and we have attempted to lay out the priority areas that are coming to focus and the goals that are coming into focus. And what we would love is for your opinion on, are these the right preliminary strategic priorities for the system's next strategic plan? And are there any important priorities or goals that have not been sufficiently emphasized or are still missing? So you may have this up on your screen. I am actually just going to enlarge it and let you read through it. And we are really, really looking forward to some of your feedback about what might be missing or what might need to be underscored more effectively.
Are you looking for feedback on the priority areas themselves on the left, or are you also looking for feedback on the goals?
Both.
Got it.
Trustee Alexander.
I'm uncomfortable at this point in my participation in this process to give you anything substantive in reaction to these 2 pages. I think that it might be a really good idea for this committee to have a meeting specifically oriented to a broader discussion of these 2 slides, and the ability to have us think through, have informal interaction on them, and maybe hear more detail as to what, quote, they mean, quote unquote. So I'm a little uncomfortable doing that at this point, but maybe others are not. So I just bring that up.
I will say, Barbara, I think you're exactly right. This is an initial high level, initial gut reaction moment. This is not the last time we'll see these slides, and they will also, I assume, and I'm sort of looking at you, our friends from Huron, through the screen here, but these will also be, I assume, sort of socialized through the next round of campus feedback, right? Because we're still going into more data gathering, more input gathering, more stakeholder gathering in the fall, that these are going to absolutely, I would guess, expand, grow, refine.
That's right. Yep, that's right. And I think to the point of kind of this continual stakeholder engagement, right? We came to the remote discussions and the spring university visits in a mode of ideation. What do you think should be a priority for the system? What goals should be on the table? We've now begun to synthesize this and have landed here on these emerging priority areas and goals. And the notion would be to actually have this in our back pocket, maybe show these 2 slides or speak to them at the very least on our next round of stakeholder engagement, because we want to demonstrate that we have heard what people have shared, and we've done some work to analyze and synthesize it, and then we are going to be getting reaction on just that, on just the same question we are posing to you all when we visit and engage in our fall stakeholder engagement.
Thank you. Trustee Loring, Donna, I see your hand up.
Yeah, in your external communication, you said you had a bunch of organizations or whatever you had contacted. I noticed that you also contacted legislators. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if, in fact, you've talked with the tribal representative in the legislature, as well as the permanent commission, which consider the people of color in the state, and that's their objective, is to help people of color and to do studies in various areas. So I think the permanent commission might be a good organization for you to talk to in the future.
Great. Thanks for that recommendation.
Great feedback. Jeremy, I see your hand.
Hello again. So these appear to be a very high level priority area. I wonder if there are going to be sub priority areas that may fall underneath individual categories. I'm thinking of a few, and again, like was mentioned before, I'm not sure that I've formulated my thoughts enough just yet to share them with the group, but maybe if we have a working group, we can work through some of those. But again, I wonder if there's like a subcategory underneath these to help us develop our goals.
Yes, so these would be the big priority areas on the gray column. And then we have some high level goals. These would also be paired with initiatives or tactics underneath each goal that would get a little bit more granular, as well as what does success look like? Because you can have a goal, but we want to understand kind of the specifics of what we mean by various items so that we can know that we're successful.
Donna, do you still have a question? Oh, you're good. Thank you. Any other feedback today? Again, we're just grounding ourselves. Oh, yes, Trish.
Thanks. I think I appreciate Barbara's point. I think we do need some time to think about this. I would ask everybody to think about the financial stability, sustainability one. I think we already have some pretty leading edge financial management activities. And I think this is a little, the goals are maybe too narrow, and that we might want to think about efficiency measures and other kinds of things. And as we think about that as a committee, it might be a question to ponder.
Thanks, Trish. Yep, Barbara.
I actually have a very, very high level question, concern, and it doesn't relate too much to this page or even the good works that are clearly underway here. Is this a board initiative or the systems office initiative?
I'm happy to take that, but I think probably Trish, since you were on the initial committee,
yep,
I'll turn it to you.
I think the board at a high level has charged the chancellor and his team with implementing a strategic plan. This committee advises, recommends. It's obviously a team effort, but I think the chancellor may want to address it. But it clearly is a system plan that the chancellor and his team need to develop with our review and comment.
That's certainly where we have begun the process and continue, and certainly was the message relayed at all of the campus visits. And I assume, quite frankly, by Huron to the folks that they're speaking with. Having said that, there's no desire to control the content. The content needs to flow from the discussions that are being had today and have already been had in many cases, and will continue through this semester and as well. So I think that one of the charges that we began holding ourselves to is to make sure that we were not dictating a result, that the community had to have the opportunity to fully participate. That doesn't mean that there'll always be agreement. In fact, it probably means that there probably won't be agreement on every point. But everyone has to have the opportunity to have their voice heard and understood and examined. And every time we do that, we know that we're talking to folks who have different levels of understanding of who we are and what we are as this constellation of universities operating under unified accreditation. Those would be my comments. On the other hand, the board plays a significant role in deciding whether the strategic plan that is produced is the strategic plan that they're going to endorse. Those are my thoughts on that matter.
Let me just make one more comment, and I'm sure other board members have more experience in talking through this particular project than I do, for sure. But it seems to me that the Board of Trustees is going to be in a very public and high level position with respect to talking about the financial situation, the reforms, the long-term justification for the public support for this university system. And there is naturally, I mean, this has nothing to do with the personalities, but it's just natural that one would presume that the system office leading a system strategic plan has institutional self-interest involved in conducting that. And if the board is actually going to be in charge of deciding if this is the plan we want and advising and involved in the process as we go through it, it seems to me the board needs to take more responsibility for promoting what this plan is, for introducing the plan or the plan process, I mean, to the stakeholders, and elevating the responsibility and ultimate content to the board level. That's some initial concern and comment that I have. And I assume more discussion would be had about that.
I will just say, and I'm gonna get the other trustees with their hands up too. I think, Barbara, you're right about our obligation as board members to really ensure not just that the outcome, not just the sign off on whatever comes out of it, but that the process along the way is one that is engaging, that does see the right things. And I want to give a lot of credit in particular to and others who've been doing this. I was and Roger and I were also on the ad hoc committee. And it has been pretty hands-on. I mean, Trish reviewed, I don't want to tell Sam, but like dozens and dozens of proposals herself to choose the strategic planning consultant that we're using, right? She was very hands-on with that. There was a lot of hands-on with the development of the data book, particularly by former Chair Irwin and former Chair Gardner, who felt that it was really the bedrock and foundation that we had to have a common language of understanding of both the challenges that we face and the realities that we face for enrollment, for money, for the different demographic challenges we have as a state, economic challenges, that if we couldn't speak the language together of what those challenges are and articulate them, then we wouldn't be able to come up with anything to agree on, right? Or that would actually have a meaningful difference. So I think you're right. I'm going to make an ask of everyone at the end of this meeting. I'll do it now instead, I guess, to take that data book, to take that feedback form, to send it out to people, right? Whether it's faculty members to faculty or staff to staff, but because I think we all are going to benefit when what we don't want to have happen is we end up with a strategic plan and people go, wait, what? You were doing strategic planning? I have something to say about that. That will undermine us before we even get started. So I think your points are very well taken. And again, see this being the first meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee as a regular standing committee, we certainly will have full agendas going forward. I want to get Trustee Donnelly and then Trustee Loring.
Thank you, Chair Kane. And I just want to piggyback a little bit on what both you and Chair Riley said. There is a board policy that spells out the process and how we're supposed to go about this. There was initially a thought that it would be purely a board-driven kind of document. And after a lot of discussion, because there was a lot of different things going on, a lot of giant initiatives that change how things are going. If it was concentrating on getting our R1 status, raising money for how we build buildings, where we go, and where do we want to grow? How do we want to do it? How do we invest in the future of the university? And realizing that we had finite resources, having a strategic plan helps you kind of focus in. Does it fit within where we think we want to wind up or not? And so after the initial discussion from some of the board members who have a very great sense, former board members who had a great sense of urgency and wanted this all done in a couple of weeks, in consultation with the Chancellor and the staff, going through the board process, kind of laid out, it'll be a little slower, it'll be a lot more collaborative, and in the end, what Chair Kane said, we're going to have better buy-in because it won't just be the board saying, here, everybody, this is what we want you to do. We're going to gather, compile, and build together. And I think we'll have a better document when we come on the other end. So your question is a good one. Who started it? I think the discussion started at the board level where we were saying, we have a lot going on. Should we be doing all of this? And does all of it lead us to where we want to go? And then we followed a very well laid out process that got us to where we are today. With the leadership of the two chairs previous to Chair Riley, and now with Chair Riley committed to having that goal or that where we want to go on the horizon. So I think the ownership is there. The process needs to be, as I think the Chancellor said, where we don't dictate the outcome, but we help guide the discussions and gather. Chuck Chincat used to say when he was in the legislature that none of us is smarter than all of us. And so when we have, I'm sure I know that's a quote from somewhere else, but I love when Chuck said it. But you gather the more of us that are involved in this process, the better it should be. And I think how you build it is important, but I think what we come out with on the other end should be a document that we can, living document that we can all implement and know that the university would be better at the end of us implementing it than it was to start. So that's, I think Trish said her first thing this morning, I was here for history. So there's my donation of the history of having been on the board for a couple of years. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Trustee Loring, Donna, did you want to add something else at this stage?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think, Barbara's right on. This board is going to be totally responsible for this plan. The other thing that I was wondering about, and I might have missed it, was the working group. Can you say something about that? I'm not sure who's on it or how that works.
Yep. So Kim Marie Jenkins and Jeff St. John are the spearheads of the working group, and we are working, Huron is working with them to involve thought leaders from across the system to help guide our interactions with various stakeholders across the system, and also to be really creative thinkers in terms of different initiatives that would align with various goals that are coming about. And we had a really great in-person working session in May, where we actually did a whiteboard exercise of some of the goals that have come up to date at that point, and did some of a brainstorming and creative exercise around some of the initiatives at play. Jeff?
I would only add to what you said, Brenna, that we're seeking to use the work with this group to communicate in both directions. So what are the initiatives and ideas coming forward from the campuses that are campus-centric in all the ways that have been described already and important to constituencies on the campuses that need to be accounted for in the process? And then also, how can we best communicate back through this group, sharing feedback and requests for further input from them across the system to all of our constituents on all of our campuses. So far, it's been a very productive group, and a group that's generated quite a few ideas, as you see reflected in the discussion today.
Yeah, is there a list of members of this group someplace?
There is, and be happy to share that with the board through Ellen.
We can get it sent out to the whole committee. That's a great point.
Thank you.
Trustee Loring. We have about 13 minutes left in this meeting. So Brenna, I'm going to look to you because I know you still have a few more slides, but I also want to see maybe you can prioritize them, or
we're done with our slides.
Oh, amazing. Yep. That's perfect. Thank you. Chancellor, I wanted to give you a chance because obviously there's been a lot of conversation in the last 10 minutes or so about the different roles, and you've been involved in this process since it started. You want to give us some thoughts here as we start to wrap up this meeting?
Sure, just a couple of thoughts, picking up on the conversation we were just having and then going forward. Again, and as it has been mentioned, each of our universities is used to producing on a 5-year cycle or so their own strategic plan. And that work is continued throughout the time. That's starting a system revisit, which hadn't been done since 2004, although there had been updated statements from the board, for instance, around the great decline in the economy that occurred in 2008 and 2009, and the directive to pursue unified accreditation, or at least investigate unified accreditation as a future operating tool, which ultimately led to the board's adoption moving forward. And we have been, in fact, operating as a unified accredited institution for 2 full years prior to our visit this fall. One thing that has happened, and it was at the request of the board, although the board did not impede each university investing in its own strategic plan on its own required calendar, but the board made a statement that they would not take those up are finalized those as an accepted recommendation from each university until such time as the system had done its first strategic plan since 2004. Obviously, things got complicated because of COVID, I might point out as well, which may have delayed the start, but not by too terribly much. So I think what we're looking for coming forward, at least from the system's point of view, is a way to have this constellation of universities work together for the good of all. I have publicly said that we have a legal commitment to maintaining universities where they currently are. But we have to accept that there are very big challenges to doing that unless we change our ways of thinking and cooperating. And hopefully, at least in part, this strategic plan will be a road forward on how to bring that result about without hurting anyone and hopefully helping everyone. And that's what I'm most charged up about seeing, and quite frankly, in the notes that have been made and clearly by the Huron folks who were with us on what they emphasized, I think is the beginning of a road forward, but it has a lot more road to cover before that gets finalized. Those are my thoughts, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chancellor Malloy. It's great. And Trish, I want to give you the same opportunity.
Yeah, good discussion. I think it's really important to keep in mind that this is a major effort and we really need significant change and we need to do it thoughtfully. So we have to all be in it together, which is part of bringing more people onto this committee and bringing as many voices together as we can. And if we don't do it together, I think the potential for it to be realized and implemented becomes less and less. So I'm really pleased to see this bigger, broader committee and more engagement as we move forward. And I'm very sensitive to President Mundy's point about not overburdening the campuses. On the one hand, we want to do absolutely the most we can for engagement, recognizing the limits of capacity for busy administrators and faculty. So we're going to have to figure out a way to balance that. And I'm sure we can.
Thank you so much, Trish. And I will just add a few things as we close. That again, today was about level setting. We're trying to get us all to a similar place or a more grounded place into the work that's been done, the data that's available to us, the process that is underway, what we can expect in the next few months. But I would also welcome feedback, by email to me directly in response to this meeting. If there are things you want to see from the next meeting, if things you want to spend more time on, have more grounding in, more understanding of, because again, process really is very key to the success of this plan and our ability as a board to use this plan going forward. I want to just say a couple things about that, which is, yes, as Jim said, we're supposed to be doing a strategic plan for a while. This is a little overdue. And when we came to that realization together, it was also very important that just because it was late, we weren't going to rush it because of all of the need for broad stakeholder engagement as we continue to balance a virtual and in-person world. And I think that the work that's been done so far has been true to that spirit, and we're going to keep that up as we go forward. We also will keep the full board informed at our regular board meetings. And as we see today with Trustee Cates, other trustees may join us from time to time as well as we do this work. I am never afraid to end a meeting a few minutes early, recognizing most people are back to back, but I'll just say, are there any closing questions for today? I don't see any, so I will just say thank you to our friends from Huron for your hard work, this excellent presentation. I know I'm going to be continuing to spend more time with it. I will make the ask that I alluded to earlier, which is if there are people that you can send out the data book to, send out the link to, we'll work on making sure, as Trustee Loring pointed out, that it's clearer. You can offer feedback on the website. We'll get on that as well. because this is the time where we need the feedback. This is when we need it. We'll get it when the strategic plan is done, but this is when we really need it. So thank you for anything you can do to help us spread the word through various constituencies and across campuses and across the state. It's really important. And I'm looking forward to continued work with this committee. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a great